real as possible, then that's going to be the best case scenario, because people who are going to see this are like going through all the things I'm going through right now, I'm sure, and their own things. So
yeah, for sure. These are like also just, I mean, I've only done like 2 so far. This is the 3rd one, but they're, I don't know, it's just so helpful
yeah.
in general, and just I don't know, I guess like just having a conversation about real stuff,
For sure.
being honest about it. But yeah, you look great.
Thank you. I put on makeup today. It's
Yeah.
like a shock.
Yeah, I already told you like before, like the haircut looks so good.
Thanks. Yeah, I was going for something that made me feel whimsical and creative, because that would be a good personality fit. So I like it. It's a fun experiment.
Yeah, I like it a lot. It looks really good.
Thank you.
I get used to seeing myself even with makeup on.
I know you look awesome. You're glowing.
Thanks. It's been getting better because it like started acting crazy in March, and we went through it, but it's finally.
I know. I've kind of been along for the journey. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like you've only seen me. Well, not only, but in like the times we have talked, I never have on makeup whenever.
Right.
We do.
Same. And then we talk, and like usually it's like whatever, FaceTime on my phone or something, and so I'm talking to you like this the entire time. Oh, you see the hole in my ceiling. Yeah, my landlords decided to like totally redo all of the plumbing in my apartment while I was still living here, and they like put these holes in the ceiling, and it was one of those things where they just didn't give me any warning at all. And this is like during coronavirus and everything. Didn't give me any warning at all. Said like, yeah, we're gonna do this. Maybe this was like a couple weeks ago, but yeah, that kind of just said like, yeah, we're gonna do this. And they had the plumbers over and everything. And then it was 10:30 at night before it was resolved, and just no warning whatsoever. The water's completely off, and yeah. And they said, do you want us to fix the hole in your ceiling? And I was like, absolutely not. You can wait until I move out in a week to do that. So yeah, my place is kind of a wreck because I'm moving and stuff, but
that's frustrating though. But
yeah. It's crazy.
Really nice.
Yeah.
Let me know that you're, tearing stuff up in here.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess we can. Well, I guess like I'll first ask, like, how are you doing?
I think it's like my answer for that will be different like any day that you ask. And I do think, like this is a time where everybody, well, one of my good friends and professors in my grad program said that everybody has their own personal challenges that they're going through right now, aside from the whole coronavirus situation, because it's making everybody act like they're on drugs. And so everybody's got their own like heart soul searching stuff to go through, and I definitely have my fair share of that and have been getting through it, and it's hurt my creative process a lot, I will say that. I'm trying to like read and write and watch movies right now, but it's like ideally I would be starting my thesis paper right now, and I would be wrapping up a couple of projects that I started at the beginning of the spring, and applying to shows and things. But it's like, yeah, some days I'm on point and I'm in the studio and I'm working on those days, and then sometimes I have a few days in a row where I don't know what's going on. I mean, it's just going through a lot of emotional stuff and figuring my life out. But I do take comfort in thinking that what my friend and professor said is true, that a lot of people are going through this kind of crazy transformational experience right now. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, do y'all still have access to your studios?
We do. So I already felt like when I first, so like we went to school together in Alabama, so like the architecture here was totally different to me, and our art building looks well, at first to me it kind of looked like a jail. If somebody sees this and they hear me say that, they're gonna be like, wow, that's so crazy that she thinks that. But no, I mean, for real. And I mean, it was like concrete, there weren't very many windows, it looked crazy to me, and it was like built in the 80s. Anyway, now I love it. I think it's sort of like this type of building that I've never existed in before. And I definitely believe that like architecture affects your psychological state and everything. So now I have appreciation for it. But it's really weird now because whenever we go to the studios, we have key card access. So it was always one of those things. If I wanted to go at 3 a.m, I could, and that extends into the coronavirus situation. So when I go now, with it being so empty and with like, I mean, we had one maintenance guy before Sean, and I think that he comes when he can, but the situation again is like intense. So um, just seeing like things that have not been like, I can see my student supplies from like 2 months ago in the trash can or whatever, like from when they like cleaned out their lockers, and it just feels kind of apocalyptic. So yeah, so we have access to our studios, and that's a really great thing. And it's funny, I feel like I'm never there at the same time as my peers, but I definitely know that they're coming in and out because I can see new projects that they're working on in their studios. And so that's really nice to like, signs of life.
Yeah.
And I sound like I've been by myself, and that's not true at all. We have 12 people in my parents' house right now.
Oh,
So my family from Chicago came to quarantine with us, and my family from Mississippi did as well. And I'm so thankful for that. Like, again, with just these things that I've been going through, like having family around has been so huge for me. So yeah.
that's really good too. Yeah, I guess like we just like jumped into it, and
Yeah.
was, like, totally backtracking a little bit, but an introduction because I was like, we have.
People are like, who the fuck is this girl? Oh, sorry. Am I not allowed to cuss? You could probably edit it out.
You're fine.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's fine.
It's like all the podcasts I listen to are like X rated, not even R. So did you start listening to Girls Gotta Eat?
Yes, I get so excited every time. Like my
Oh, good.
podcast updates me. It's like there's a new episode, and I'm like, yay! I'm
I
so
know. I
um,
know. I
yeah.
binged, and so now I'm like up to date. Oh, I love them. But anyway, yes, I'm Candace von Hoffman. Lane and I used to study photo together at the University of Alabama, and we both pretty much went to grad school at the same time and have been like the modern version of pen pals, FaceTime pals, like getting through it together. Like I remember calling you. It was freezing cold here. It was like the dead of winter, and I was driving home doing my commuting thing, driving home at like 9 o'clock at night and totally overwhelmed. And you were like, it was one of the first times to talk on the phone, and like we were both going through the exact same thing. Just dealing with like, what even is a grad student? What is that dynamic? How do I act with my peers? Just like all these random situations that you would never think like, even if we're both in grad school, that we would both be going through. But I mean, it's just been clutch having you, seriously.
Yeah.
I don't know like how I would have survived without like having you to call.
Yeah, no, same. It was really just like perfect timing when you called too, because I feel like it was at that moment where the stress really started hitting
Mm-hmm.
with both grad school and just life in general. And like the amount of things that we have in common is like so scarily it's like crazy because it felt like everything that we were explaining, it was like, oh my gosh, that's literally the same thing that I'm
Yeah.
going through. So it's like so great, like so great. And we never talked for like a short amount of time either.
No, it would be like a miracle if we talked on that phone for like an hour.
Yeah.
But like, to be fair, I just don't know. So in terms of like dealing with imposter syndrome, I literally felt uncomfortable talking to anybody else about things like that. And like both of us were in long distance relationships. Yours is still going well, mine didn't work out, but like I would have lost my mind if I didn't have you to talk to through certain things. And I mean, it's just crazy. Yeah, like all the things that we were going through together. Yeah,
Yeah.
very grateful.
um exact same. Like it's just like such a, I tell my mom all the time, it's like I'm so thankful for Candace because like it's great having a support system and things, but like having someone that relates to you in like the closest way, like from top to bottom. I don't know. It's just really great. So yeah.
And I'm still coming back to Alabama so that we can do our collabs.
Yeah.
You might have to meet me in Mobile. That's like my hometown, but it could be fun.
Because we were supposed to work on something together over the Christmas break, but then I had something come up like the day before we were supposed to meet, and I was so
Yeah.
sad. And then all of this crap is happening now. I'm like, oh my gosh, I wish that we could have at least met that one time.
I'm pretty sure that you had a really fun time, right? Like you got to meet up with your friends for your birthday, so it was like not even a big deal. Like you still had a great time that day, so it's like kind of worth it. But that's my opinion.
Yeah, I was.
I'm always like never have regrets for those opportunities that you get to going out with friends, because it's like we can work together anytime. Like to me, there's no deadline on that. But as somebody who grew up with military parents and had to move around all the time, I'm like, my only regrets is not spending more time with friends. So I was like, I totally get it. But yeah, I still, I started that Confederate monument project that I wanted to bring you in on, and I still think about it, and I still need help with the bigger monuments. And maybe the next time I dye the fabric, I'll actually get it like a more blood red so that I don't have to do so much work in Photoshop. But you gotta embrace the mistakes as they come along. So it's fine.
And it's I guess like on a totally unrelated note, which is I guess is something we can visit later. I do still have like research articles on.
Oh yes, yeah.
So, like it's on a separate folder.
Need that right now, because that's literally all I've been doing, is because it's one of those things where like not only am I not in Alabama right now, I made a bunch of amazing work when I was there. Video projects, photo projects, writing, and I can do all those things here, and there's no reason why I should be stuck the way that I am. But I think it's because of like going through, like it's almost like I went through a breakup of like what that my access to that state meant for my work. And it's just like tough. So I keep having these ideas of like where I take it from here. And in some ways I'm thinking like, what if I'm covering myself in a red sheet and I am the monument, because I completely like make this work seeing myself as like a part of this landscape, and like sort of because of my family history, like right in the middle of it. And that's something that I deal with all the time. But and I'm totally going down a rabbit hole, because I'm saying all this without anybody having context of what project I'm talking about. But.
Do you want to like share just I guess for like a little bit of context, like just what your work is about in general?
Yes. Yeah. So at this point in time, throughout my first year of graduate school, I started out exploring my family story, specifically like through the lens of the women in my family, because they've always been the people that I look up to, my leadership. Yeah, I mean, really, really just like my role models, and thinking about my family history and how there's like that side of it, which is these people who I love and adore. And then there's this other side of like my identity and my family history, which has gone through the like toxic cycle of systemic racism and growing up in the South, and like generations and generations of dealing with that, and exploring like what that does to mental health in my family, what that does to our position in the community, how that evolves over time, and then sort of looking at how these things relate to public history of the South on a broader scale, and how untrustworthy it is. And so it's like me not trusting my own memories, not trusting my own identity, and seeing myself as being like a piece of this huge problem that is systemic racism, and literally a descendant of slavers. And looking at the landscape that I grew up in, and dealing with these really complex feelings of wanting so badly to like figure out what the root of this anxiety is how my family has affected lots of people, and how to talk about these things. I think like having race talks and talking about history is incredibly important. And it's something that like I've engaged in a lot in the past and felt both grateful for those experiences and extremely like uncomfortable like while I was in the middle of them. And so yeah, like exploring my own relationship with that, but then as well like how that public history of systemic racism affects different people, because I don't really want this to be like, oh, my auntie's racist or something like that. You know, it's not really about me, even though I can use my own experiences as a very powerful tool. I think it's just something that a lot of people are going through. And I've been so lucky to make that work here actually, and have my breaks where I go to Alabama, because it's sort of like something I wouldn't have been brave enough to do when we were at school at the University of Alabama, I think. It's sort of like, don't shit where you eat, you know? So it's kind of like, I definitely wouldn't have felt the amount of space that I feel to like make mistakes. Like I know that this is a very sensitive conversation to have, and so like I'm not going to get it right every time I try to like visually express what's going on. And the faculty at the University of Utah has been incredible with helping me navigate that and saying, yeah, this is problematic, or maybe you could push harder, maybe you could go further into this and be a little bit less scared of saying something that you would see or you would be worried about being offensive or whatever. And so I have the opportunity to like hone these things out outside of the South before I have a show in Birmingham where my family go, and I can hopefully have thick skin enough to ride that out. But yeah, and it's just been incredibly rewarding, because I feel like I've been, in a selfish way, I've been like dealing with my own trauma and anxiety by making this work. And so I think maybe for people of color, like even in Utah, like I've had a lot of people come to me and say, my family's been affected by the Mormon church here, and the way that you're acknowledging systemic racism is actually makes me feel kind of like in a weird way you would think it would bring up feelings of anger, but a lot of people of color come to me saying like it makes me feel almost like validated, or like there's something therapeutic there about this conversation even being acknowledged. And I think that it's important for white people to see the importance of them also talking about these things, because it's not the job of like people of color to make us think that this is important. It's important. So anyway, that's the stance that I'm coming from, and I'm really lucky to be able to do it here. Because yeah, I mean, there's parallels here, but also I'm the only one from Alabama, and everybody can kind of have an outsider perspective, neutral, can help me really try to tackle this the best way that I can. And it's hard because I have a lot of emotional attachment to this. I mean, it really is dealing with my own trauma and anxiety around my past and growing up in a white bubble. So
Yeah, and it's so interesting. I'm kind of going back to what you said about just like, even though it's like a personal aspect added to it, like how so much more important it is in the broader like sense of what you're talking about and discussing in your work. Because I had someone last semester tell me, or kind of like pose the question like, why should the personal even matter? Like no one's going to want to fund work that's like about your family or that's about you, that's so accessible, in a way that's kind of like demeaning how important the personal is, even because it's not to say like our personal stories are so different from other people's. Like I think that is a huge point of it, is that this is another personal story that's also speaking to this very real thing. And just about like what you were saying about like white people taking responsibility in some way with the past and the histories that we're all connected to, because we're going to be connected to the past, and it informs the present that we're in now. Is, you know, first of all, like not pretending that racism like doesn't, or pretending that racism doesn't exist, because X, Y, and Z.
It's absurd. It really is absurd because you have to be able to look outside yourself to see the reality
Yeah.
that is. And for us, I did this presentation here for my fellow grad students about redlining, and I kind of felt like nervous before because it was a 20-minute presentation, and everything that I put together for it, it had great images, it had great artists that talk about this from the South, but aside from that, I felt like they know about all this, surely.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't, because we grew up in southern towns where it's extremely obvious that there are neighborhoods that are still affected by redlining not being invested in by banks, and literally families of color, like for generations, not being able to buy homes. And that is, like, for an American family, the main way to build long-term wealth is to like own a home, so that you're not like constantly paying rent, you're not dealing with landlords, you're able to send your children to college, all these things. And for me, that was like, even as a kid, I remember seeing the city as being divided, and that was something that adults definitely had their, like in my circle, definitely had their own language about, which didn't even really make sense to me at the time, and definitely now looking back, I'm like, oh, okay. But but it's crazy because like out here in Utah, it's something that for sure was like kind of a new thing to explain to them. So that's a way that we deal with racism today. And like, if you're somebody who can look outside of yourself, that's pretty obvious to see, especially if you live in the South, but a lot of people deliberately ignore that things like that are still going on. And it's kind of, I mean, it's like depressing, especially in light of everything that's going on right now.
Yeah, it's really crazy. And also just thinking about, because I mean, I imagine like some people know, but I guess like I'm expecting that there will probably be people that are like watching that don't know like the background that I come from, and how we're able to like see these things in the same light. Is that I grew up in, my neighborhood was Black, but I have always been in dominantly white settings. My school was dominantly white, both like K through 12 and college. And I guess you can kind of see it, but the art classes, or the art department that we had, I feel like they're, I don't want to say that it wasn't, like, I'm not crapping on the program at all, but I do feel like these like conversations we're having now are not conversations that were protected in that environment at all. So yeah, that's something that I think about, and also thinking about like different things that I'm now, like, especially being able to be out of the space of the Southern landscape, like questioning, like when I came here to Chicago, all I would hear was like, it's the most successfully segregated city in like our country. And I like had to, every time I'd hear someone bring that up and I would look around, I'm like, this looks the same as from like me being in Alabama, and then like having to like really think about or like point that out and be like, you know what, that's actually a problem that for me, this is what is normal. And also like challenging, like excusing certain things that people say, and specifically white people growing up, that I probably didn't think about at the time. And I think the one saying that I always go back to is like certain white people making comments like, oh, if I dated this person out of my race, or if I dated this person outside of my gender, my parents would beat me, and not thinking anything about it, but then getting older and realizing like, you know, that's actually like really racist and homophobic, and that's not cool.
Yeah. Because we're talking about obvious things like redlining, but another thing that I've been researching is like hate crime and radical white supremacist groups, and actually how throughout the Trump administration. They have gone from this, and I think there's like so many fascinating answers that we could have for this phenomenon, but basically how people tracking them have like seen that they've gone out of this clump in the southern states of the US and throughout Trump's presidency have spread all over the country. And that's not to say that they weren't there to begin with, but I mean, I guess it's entirely possible that Trump's, narrative and, ignorant hate speech basically like has, it's possible that it's inspired these groups to form in that period of time, but I think it might be more likely that they were there and that they felt validated in some way to come out in public enough to where they were able to be tracked by these journalists and websites that, and I can send you actually a link if you want to include it in the description with some of the sites I've been using to track this data, but it's just a really disturbing trend to see. And then, what we're seeing with police brutality, it seems like despite what happens in the news last week, it's always becoming a more and more serious issue. And so hate crime based on race still happens so much today. And, just even like going back to your background, like those schools that you went to were probably white flight schools. I mean, there's hardly any, they'd have to be super, super new for Alabama, but there are hardly any private schools that you can go to that aren't, because of how bad our education system has been for so long. And so it's like that tension that you felt from white students is literally because generations later, you're going against the stream of segregation and it's still a problem. And it's sometimes it's hard for me to talk to my family about even what I make art about for so long, because I genuinely feel furious. And maybe that's part of the reason why I'm going through a rut right now and I'm just reading or whatever, but it's really, really hard to to approach something like this creatively when you feel so much anger and frustration and you feel like you're responsible for it in some way. And I'm not saying that I literally did these things, you know what I mean? But I'm just saying that because of my family history, because of my bloodline, it's impossible for me to ignore.
Yeah, and I feel like that speaks volumes, that it's not something that is like, in my mind, it's like racism can't just keep being swept under the rug. Like, it has to be addressed, it has to be confronted, and it's not always going to be a thing where we're going to have these conversations with people who like necessarily want to hear it or don't want to talk about it. But if people want to be stuck in ignorance, then that's fine. For them, I guess it's not, we'll see how far that gets them. But
it's more than ignorance. It's literally a sickness. Like I've seen how, and of course, I'm still figuring out how to explain this in a tangible way, and I would need a lot of help to explain it in a scientific way. If any of y'all are psychologists, psychiatrists, let me know. But and you want to work with me, let me know. But I've seen how racism passed down generation after generation can affect mental health. I can see how it affects your career, your standing in the community. But you're never going to see something like that unless you acknowledge it. And I think that's the core thing. I mean, it's like any other, it's a sickness, and it's like any other mental sickness. You're not going to move on until you can acknowledge that you are a part of the problem and that you see the problem. I mean, I think that's the hardest thing for a lot of white people from my background is there's almost like this thing that if you engage in the conversation and you admit that these things are still going on today, then there's almost like this fear that somebody's calling you racist, but oftentimes the first person who brings up that word is the white person.
Mm.
And it's like, nobody's going to hate you or think you're a racist if you're trying to have the conversation. I don't think.
Yeah.
And maybe you're doing it in a way like from a place of atonement, and that's one thing, and that's up to the people in your community whether they want to forgive you or not. But I don't know. I just don't. I realize that it's difficult for a lot of people, but I don't see anything but positive outcomes from actually genuinely trying to talk about these things.
Yeah. And that's always the first step to it, is being willing to engage in the conversation and not just,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like not even just listen to it, but actually really try and understand um, what's being talked about. And I guess for like people who are watching this right now, like the reason why like we're both like able to talk about this so comfortably is because we had this conversation in different ways before, and we also
Yeah,
understand.
like we've been kind of, you've been there for every part of my creative process, from the point that I was like talking about bees. That's a whole nother story.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, and it's been like, I guess I was talking about people here who keep me in check. I feel like you keep me in check too, because there have been a lot of conversations where I've said, hey, like this came up in my research today. And I think I remember in particular when I found the image of the children who were forced into slavery in the Delta in the 60s.
Yeah.
And it was like kind of like this creative breakthrough I had with this image. Was like a really emotional experience for me. And talking to you about it, I remember there were a lot of things that you said on that phone conversation that I took with me after the fact, and like were in my journal and became bits for writing and everything. And like I think that that's something that I definitely want to be clear about throughout my entire process, is like I 100% rely on you. I 100% rely on my committee. I 100% rely on anybody who's willing to talk to me. Like this stuff for the most part is not coming out of my ass. Like it's it's coming from my community 100%. And thank God. I mean, you're incredibly generous for helping me in all the ways that you have, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean it's definitely shared too. um I just like it sound I don't even want to say like it sounds like cliche or mushy, but it's just like
cool.
being able to have you through like this process, it's just really been like so, what is the word that I'm looking for? It's just been really great, because there have been times that I've asked you or like told you like I'm really afraid to do this thing, or I'm like an artist block and I don't know what to do, like next thing. And I've shared with you like what my work is about, but we're just gonna leave that. And it's like you like give that extra like, no, go ahead and do it. Like what is there, like honestly, what is there, I don't want to say like what is there to lose, like be reckless, but in the sense that it's like getting away from just being stuck in comfort. um
Yeah.
which is like, I don't know, I feel like we push each other to think beyond what we know, and being more comfortable with like going into the places that maybe we don't know so much about, or maybe we're afraid to go to
Mm-hmm.
um to different, places with our work and things.
Yeah, and it's so important. Like I was saying earlier with I kind of briefly mentioned going through imposter syndrome, and like having you to hold me accountable is so important, because there are so many periods where I have like been shot down on an idea, or like something doesn't work out, and the anxiety that goes with that experience is almost paralyzing until like I can talk to you about it, and you've gone through the same thing, and you're like, but I want for you, and I think this goes the same way, like we both want for each other what we want for ourselves, which is to like get out of that headspace and just keep moving forward. And that's hard, but like having somebody there to push you through it is like crucial, I would say.
Yeah, I mean this one of my panel members in critique this recent semester, like last month when I had interdisciplinary critique, he was actually in the painting department, and he was like, it's so important to like embrace the mess, embrace like just let it all out, and then you can like fix up what you need to along the way, but you'd be so surprised at what comes out when you're not walking on eggshells. And
Mm.
even though I'm not fully in creative mode right now because there's like so much transition going on right now, I still hold that. Just with anything like artistically, I guess in life in general, it's just embracing the mess, because there's so much like richness that can come out of that. But yeah, is I don't know. I'm just like very, very thankful to have honest, honest people in my life, and you're definitely like at the top of the list, especially. And not only like we're not even just like art friends,
Yeah.
right? Like we and like not gonna get into that, but Candace probably knows more about my life than people in my family.
And
Um,
that's an area where I push you too, because I'm like the most TMI person. Like I get this all the time. People are like, Candace, you got to reel it in. Like you cannot be telling people. But I'm just like, life is short. Life is short. Let's talk about all the stuff. Let's talk about work. Let's talk about dating. Let's talk about what's going on with our families. Let's talk about our mental health.
yeah,
Like that's how I feel about you too. And so like I share everything with you.
yeah, exact same. And it's helpful too. And it's I was like, this is not like a I don't know what you want to call that. Like this is I was like, you're not someone that's like just here for like the moment of grad school. Um yeah, and then also like just thinking down the road, because we mentioned it earlier, like collaborating on something together, and this is just one of the many because we're able to have this conversation. And um
I know. I'm like,
yeah,
move to New York.
look at us having great conversations um together in this way. And then even I'm gonna like put it out there, and I don't even know like if she'd watch, but we've talked about it before, but someone that I'm so thankful came at like the right, like perfect timing in undergrad was Allison.
Oh,
Such an angel. Because I'm like
so you were saying you talked to her about your series.
not this recent one, but in undergrad I feel like it was her that like sort of pushed me to think more like critically, conceptually
Mm-hmm.
about just work in general. And I definitely still carry that.
Same here, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think another thing is like her writing was incredibly inspiring for me. So it's like her work is really strong, but that's something that I'm like constantly going back to her website.
Yes.
We should send her this. She's gonna be like, wow, there.
We talked about you, Allison. She's definitely one of those people that
We were incredibly lucky to have her.
yeah.
Seriously. And I share Cookie Morgan's work a lot. A lot with my fellow grad students, because she's makes so much work about redlining, and I think that her work is extremely visually successful and incredibly moving. And that she was just so generous with us. I don't know if you had the pleasure of working with her, but
Yeah.
she was incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wish that I had I was only able to hear about like how great of an instructor she was through other people, because I lucked out with being able to be in her class, but I had looked at her work and like the work that I'm not sure if she's still working on, but what she was doing work on in regard to Birmingham, it was
Mm-hmm.
fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish that I don't know how it is now, but there's I don't know, there's so much potential for the program, and there's really incredible people there. As they change stuff out. So
Yeah.
yeah, such a blessing in disguise. Or not even in disguise. It was just like serendipity, I guess. But yeah.
Yeah, we definitely should be sending this to them.
I was like, you should watch it. Look at us. Even though we haven't even like been gone a long time, it just still feels
it feels like an eternity. And I was after I had my BFA defense, it was like right after they told me that whatever, you know, like you pass essentially,
yeah.
or whatever it is. I remember my painting professor Bryce in the hallway, and I just couldn't get over the emotions of like successfully defending my statement and having that show. I had a great time with Caroline DePaul doing that show. I mean, we stayed up so late. we finessed it. We got it right, and it was a great turnout. But yeah, I remember the actual defense, and afterwards there were all these emotions like, oh wow, you know, like just being validated by all these people that were along for the process for the 4 years. And Bryce Speed kind of stopped me in the hallway, and he was like, any grad school is going to be lucky to have you. And when he said that, I almost had like this twinge in my stomach. I was like, I already had this feeling like I want it so badly, but I mean, this is going to sound really sad when I say it, but like, I don't know if I'm worthy. Like, I don't know if anybody's going to see my work and like really say like, we want her. And everybody was saying like, oh, you're really young, you know, you'd have a lot more success if you took a couple years or took a year or whatever. And I was taking that to heart too. So when he said that, I was like, oh my God, like I want this more than anything. And I was terrified by how much I wanted it, honestly. And I still think about him saying that all the time now.
Yeah.
So I think we really were like incredibly lucky to have the people that we had.
Yeah, they were great. And also went to your show too, which was also fantastic.
So it's both different and similar to what I make now, but mostly different.
Yeah. And also like just bouncing off that, I hear it a lot of times, or I heard it from my professor that I had this past semester, just how like your work is always gonna like go back to the roots in some way. Like you're gonna see like ties and just embracing the process. Because I always think like, how do people have like these really expansive, like great bodies of work over time, and it all like relates in a way? And that's like that. I guess that that explains why. And we are both still young, and so like just having people that believe in us, and not even because we're young, but just because like we have the potential to do great things, is super encouraging within itself. So yeah, it's really just a great thing. And even with your work, like early on, I don't even remember what class we had together, honestly. It was a photography class, and I don't even remember the project, but I do remember like talking to you after class and like saying like, your work is really amazing. And like I mean, first of all, I was really annoyed by the people in the class that like weren't.
That was the day that we critiqued my nudes, basically.
Yeah.
It's a funny way to put it.
I was so annoyed by that because like people were either not paying attention or weren't looking. And
it was completely out of discomfort, which is something that I really enjoy making my audience feel. It's like one of my favorite, for me, it's like the easiest thing to elicit. And I think some people are like, what? That's crazy. But I'm just like, no, it's like very easy for me. Like I know how to make people uncomfortable. I love doing that.
Yeah.
I always know where the line is, and I love crossing it with art because I can't do that in real life. I'm actually like a commitment phobe in real life. And so having you validate me after was like, incredible because I did have some satisfaction out of like seeing who couldn't engage with a female body and who could. And that's something that I think a lot of like female artists, like they like to touch on that at some point, you know, earlier in their career. And it's definitely something I think about now. Like I have tons of photo shoots that I haven't shown anybody from grad school where I'm like, whatever, I'm not going to say, but
Yeah, yeah.
lots of work like that, you know?
I mean, I've already told you like my like absolute awe of Francesca Woodman. So I'm like, if
Yes.
a lot of people won't know the name, I was like, you can look it up.
Mhm.
You can look it up if you want to see it, but just that kind of thing. I'm like, this should not make anyone uncomfortable. It shouldn't, but for some reason it does. And
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's something to be said for, and I think that, oh gosh, oh, I'm forgetting her name, even though she's like one of my favorite artists of all time. Silhouettes.
Carol
Walker.
Walker.
Yeah, we said it at the same time. Anyway, so I think that Carol Walker does this perfectly, and it's something that I'm interested in exploring when I take nudes. Is like this weird like tension between female sexuality, which is something that's punished still in Western society, even. And in most cultures, I would say is probably punished. So visualization of female sexuality and having the photographer be the one who takes photos of themselves is a whole other thing. And the tension between that and like horror and a lot of the things that I've been exploring in grad school is like distorting my body, but like trying to be sexual at the same time and like making something that's monstrous and sexual at the same time, because I think that that's what fetish is. It is like taking advantage. It is something, it's a word that comes from colonization, and there is something to be said for desire, wanting to take something for yourself, but then like the corruption and the violence and the horror that comes with that, and the trauma that comes with that is very real. And so it's kind of funny to like to glamorize that. It's like, it's ironic and it's messed up, but I don't know, it's something that I do. I don't show people, but I do it. That's probably like the first time I talked about it, but yeah.
I mean, I was like, we talk about so much at this point that it's just like, you know.
Yeah.
I'm sure like maybe I'll get asked questions after this talk, like from my mom, like, have you taken photos like that?
And you'll be like, I don't know, it depends on why you're asking. You want to buy one?
No. What happens if my answer is yes?
You want some copies?
I was like, sorry. She's probably gonna laugh at this too, though, because like me and my mom even have this conversation a lot of the times, because I'm like, mom was like, you know, probably every day I see a naked body because that's just the world that I'm a part of. And I was like, if I share this or anything like that on my accounts, I always have to put a disclaimer, like, this is not to be looked at sexually. And then she'll back it up. She's like, they just don't understand. They just don't understand.
It's easy for someone who's not in our world to say that, because like our friends were the figure models in our undergraduate classes. It's like, and even before that, when I was in high school, my parents saw my frustration with my public school art classes and were incredibly generous and sent me to the art guild when we were living in DC, and I was doing nude figure painting classes as 16, 17. And you know, it's just sort of like we have a privilege of not being some of the few people in society who don't like flinch and like recoil within themselves when they see boobs.
Yeah.
Which is so sad, because like these same people are like hooked on, you know, violent video games. Like you can almost taste and feel all the different ways to kill someone because of like modern day media.
Mhm.
But at the same time, like a vulva is going to make someone like hate you or throw up or whatever. I don't even know what the response is, honestly.
Yeah.
Pick a card. But I mean, I think that's funny. I think I love making people uncomfortable for that reason. I think it's stupid.
Yeah. Then it's
And
a question to be asked after that, like, why
yeah.
does this make you uncomfortable? And then either the reason is just not straightforward, or the reason is completely, I don't know, like it just doesn't make sense, or there's just not an answer at all. Like, why does this make?
Yeah, and I'm definitely not saying like go around and flash people,
Oh yeah,
you
yeah.
know, but like I don't know. So that's like, is it a felony? I think it is, but anyway. But and I was saying that I wasn't showing people this work, but I was. I did show. I had an open studio when I was working on one of the projects, and it had a little bit to do with like me exploring feminism and understanding like exactly what, in terms of art history, what first, second, third, and fourth wave feminism are, and visually like how to map those things. And then I was kind of having fun like doing a play on cam girls uh, by like, oh, what's it, like acting out a I'm trying so hard to remember her name, but
I know who you're thinking of, but it's like not, because she makes a lot of interesting videos about um
well, actually I was thinking of an 1800s feminist photographer.
yeah, okay, I'm thinking
And
of
I no, you're fine. And I was like kind of trying to act out like using her same props, which are like kind of see-through scarves and things, and her same poses, acting out what it would have been like for her to take photos of herself nude in the wild in the 1800s, but like on my laptop, videotaping it on my laptop, to like make this play on like the cheap video quality naked girls, cam girls, in like this weird like trying to find this like in between and this weird like lost moment and like feminism, because I don't think that like sex work and feminism are separate. I think that they're actually like two aspects of fourth wave feminism that are crucial to explore. And that's maybe a radical statement. Like we're still exploring what fourth wave feminism is right now, but I do think that sex work and camp girls has a lot to do with it, and sex workers' rights. I think that that's definitely a conversation to be had right now. But anyway, it was something I was exploring, and it was during Open Studios back in October. And I had a lot of great response from the faculty. The person I was dating at the time was not happy about it, but that's sort of like what happens when you're an artist. Like, no matter what you're making work about, there are going to be personal ramifications if you're making work about something worth talking about. And I just had to go through with it anyway. And the only person at the department who had anything but a like positive, engaged response. It wasn't even really a bad response. He was just like, "Oh, I'm here with my daughter and I don't want her to see this," which I thought was interesting because it's like, I don't think he would have said that if there was like a painting of a naked woman in my studio. So I just thought that was interesting. And I did show some stills from that video to one of the undergraduate photo classes that I was TAing for at the end of my slide on exploring these feminist, these waves of feminism and visual language with them and everything. And that was received really well. So I think that we are both in communities where we are supported, and we kind of have to like realize that while people in our life may not understand it,
Mhm.
there's a reason that they don't. And we know what we're talking about. We know what we're doing. And it's like very easy for me personally to lose sight of that because of, things I was talking about earlier, imposter syndrome, and not feeling like a professional sometimes, even though I am, and I have earned my place in the art community and all that stuff. But
Yeah. And
yeah, it's easy to doubt yourself in those kind of situations, but important to like not lose sight.
Mhm. For sure. I think this is actually about to run out of time in a little bit, but if there's
Ooh. That went fast.
It did go fast, and it's like so great, because it doesn't feel like there's time. It feels like time.
Mm.
The word I'm looking for. Oh my gosh, it doesn't feel like it's been that long of like the time went by that fast, and it's only been like close to an hour, which is also really nice too. But yeah, so is there like anything that you want to kind of leave on the table, whether it's encouragement or something that you're wanting to share with really anyone, just about, or anything that's like inspiring, if whether it's inspiring to you or something that you want to leave to inspire someone else, which I'm hoping that this whole conversation itself was inspiring, because it definitely was to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you so much for doing this. I think it's incredibly important for human beings to share their stories when things get tough. And you're making that really accessible for a lot of people. And I just think that's so important. And I feel really special that you asked me to come on. And so, like, thank you. And I'm just excited for anybody who watches this, because I think what you've done and what you've given anybody who watches this is like huge and priceless. So thank you.
Yeah.
I do want to say that I've been really like forcing myself to be forgiving. Like whatever happens in my day to day right now is okay. I'm going through a lot of personality changes, emotional changes, career changes, like all these things, and a move. And like, I just want to invite anybody else to be forgiving with themselves too, and be patient with themselves right now, because um, it's been really tough. And if you want to sit on the couch and drink all day, do it. If you want to, you know, if you want to apply to a million different shows, if you're, another artist watching this, and you want to use this time to really advance your career, I invite you to do that too. But like, remember that we're all still human beings, and we're all going through this, and that there's no right answer, and you just gotta survive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again. I mean, we talk anyway, so it's not like, oh, well, I mean, it is like, this is different than, or is it a lot different? I feel like they're like personal things that we share. That's probably the main difference in this, is that we didn't share anything personal, like with our lives, because we'll just,
Yeah. Oh, I totally did, because I like several times I just see you and I'm talking to you and I'm like, oh yeah, like I'll tell. Yeah. So
yeah, I mean, because
I didn't go crazy into it, but yeah.
we're just, comfortable with
Mm-hmm.
each other in that way.
And I will say too, I guess I should probably like plug myself. I'm trying really hard to be more consistent with my social media presence. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But my Instagram is Candace, Candace VH art. And I think the link to my website's in my Instagram bio, but
yeah. And I'll make sure to put that in the description too, so that people are able to check out your work, because we love looking at people's work. It's just, that's just, I feel like I always ask, like the first thing I'm like, do you have a website or like an Instagram? Like, can I see your work?
Right. Exactly.
But yeah, it's definitely a lot that I think people can walk away with from our conversation. And who knows, like outside of the work that we create, which also has, sort of like its cross, like parallels in a way, that they'll also be able to have a conversation just based off of our conversation, because I feel like we've definitely said a lot. And I actually can't wait to like watch this again.
Me either. I was just thinking that.
Yeah. So yeah, it's really great, and exciting. But I do thank you again. You look great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Aww.
We'll definitely be, I mean, we keep in touch anyway.
Yeah.
So
I'll give you all the inside scoop on my trip to Lake Powell. It's gonna be wild. It's a 4-day camping trip in Arizona, and these friends I'm going with are like too much fun, like actually too much fun. So I'm gonna pretend to be 18 again this weekend. It's gonna be
Yeah.
fun.
I mean, might as well. Might as well.
Yep.
Um, I don't want to say like it's nothing but time, but really, what better? I mean, even in the midst of like all the craziness, it's like what better time than now is like the thing that I keep going back to. So
Exactly. Yeah, I'll have to give you the inside scoop when I get back.
yeah, and I can't like I'll be excited when we're able to see each other in person.
I know.
And,
I'm gonna be, as soon as everything's back to normal, I'm gonna be coming to Chicago, hands down.
yeah, or like even like whichever way that we're able
Yes.
to see each
Yeah.
other.
Aw.
It'll yeah, I'm excited, but I'll let you go. I'm gonna eat something. I don't know what. But yeah,
This has been amazing. Thank you so much, Lane.
thanks. I'll talk to you soon.
You're the best. Love you. Bye.
Bye.